Hi, this is Dave with the weekly market recap, closing out the week for Friday, October the 5th. I'd like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving weekend. So a little bit different format this week. We're going to take a look at these two charts, and we're looking at the weekly chart on this side, weekly chart, and we're looking at the daily chart on this side. Just using two time frames, going from the higher time frame to the lower time frame, and just taking a look at the markets from that perspective this week. So the yellow line here represents the 8 exponential moving average on these respective charts, and the white line represents the 21 EMA on both the respective charts, and the blue line represents the 50 EMA exponential moving average on both chart time frames. So, and then the other indicator we're looking at here is an indicator that that I wrote quite a while ago. It is it's a trending indicator, and it just kind of tells you if the trend is above or below the zero line, and if it's gaining momentum or losing momentum. So not something I really want to focus on. I just want to explain what we're looking at here because we have a little bit different format this week. So let me clear off the screen. Now let's start out with a weekly chart and a daily chart of the Euro futures. So let's take a look at a couple of key things here. The first key thing to note is that the Euro, this $1.30 level is pretty key in the Euro. Okay, this $1.30 level here. Okay, that's not really working out for me, no problem. Let's just, our handy pen. So $1.30 here, $1.30 here. This is a level we've been talking about for a number of weeks. You can see here when we broke down, here, precipitated a pretty big sell-off. And on the daily chart, that lines up right in around here. Okay, on the weekly here and on the daily here. So let's take a look at some weekly trend lines. I see a couple of trend lines in play here. Let me just redraw that. So we've got this weekly trend line in play, and then we have sort of this weekly trend line in play here. And a couple of things to note on the Euro is that we broke this downtrend line, and we're back up and above the $1.30 level on the weekly chart, just above it. I mean, we had one weekly close above it here. We had a weekly close above it going back a few weeks, but then we pulled back down, right to the 8 exponential moving average at that yellow line there. Now we're pushing back up above the $1.30, and we're actually pushing up above the 50 EMA, and then we've had the 8 and the 21 crossover here to the high side. So this is a potential reversal on the weekly chart, and you can see on the daily chart we had that situation as well take place in and around there, and you can see now we've got the 8 above the 21 above the 50. So we're still below the 50 here on the weekly chart. And we've got potential room to come up and test, this trend line here. So let's look at a couple of other data points here. So if we look at the daily chart, it's much the same situation. We found resistance up and around here, pulled back down, we found support, and now we're pushing back up. So the question will be, are we going to break this high here and set to put in, maybe a higher high here on the chart from a market structure perspective? And on the weekly chart, it's looking fairly constructive, and we have potential, for higher targets. So if let's see, a couple of things that I'm looking at here. Let's take a look at some fib analysis from, I believe this was the major breakdown point here, and if we look at that, we're above the 618. As you can see, actually, we came down, and the 618 lined up from this high to this low right in and around that 8 EMA, or the bottom of that candle. So that's interesting to note, because from a fib perspective, that's sort of the line in the sand between long and short. So I would have to say that I'm more bullish than bearish, on this market. So let's look at for that reason. Let's take a look at some different areas. Like if we look at, for example, the next major high in play, if we look at this area here, that high to that low, the 618 would bring us right into this trend line here. Okay, right into that trend line there, going from this high to this low. Now, as you know, fib work is a little bit subjective, and it really requires looking at a lot of charts and sort of trying to figure out which are the levels in play. But typically I like to go from major highs to lows. This was the high before we broke down through that key level. So at that point, this high was in play. This was a major high. I mean, these are key highs as well. So the next major level I think that we're looking at is we found resistance from this high to this low at the 50%. Now we're pulling back. So the question is, are we going to come up and tag this 618 around $34.23-ish, I believe. So that is really the next question. That's something I'm looking at. So I'm going to kind of zoom into this daily chart and see what are some of the key things that we could be looking at here, that I am looking at rather. So I'm looking at this trend line, which kind of coincides with these trend lines here. And then if we look at, that's really the major trend line there. And then if we look at this trend line here, okay, and then I'm going to extend it right there. So that brings us in and around some of the same levels. So those are basically the same trend lines we're looking at on the daily as the weekly. And if you look at some of the highs that were put in place, we can sort of see, that 135-ish level somewhere in and around here. That seems to be a fairly key level there. And we also have, some of these levels in here that coincide with these lows and these peaks. So, you've kind of got this range in here where, you could come up and you could test, that trend line to the high side. So I think $1.35 is an interesting level, $1.34. Those are a couple of levels that I'll be, looking at somewhere in and around, these levels here, $1.34, between $1.34 and $1.35. Those are some interesting levels. Before it gets there, obviously it has to get through this $32.95, which is going to be probably an area of contention, and then it's going to have to get through, these highs around $1.3177 or so. So, nothing really going on here. Just in general, we're looking more bullish than bearish on the euro, and those are sort of some of the levels that I might, be keeping an eye on. Let's take a look at some fib analysis on the daily chart as well. We're probably looking at some of the same levels. We've got this level here. Let's see. We've got that level. We're above the 618 there. If we look at this level from this high to that low, you're looking at 134.17, which is fairly close to this level as well. And you would expect that, because these charts are, they're different time frames, but they're they're essentially the same charts, and you've got the same major inflection points, the same major swing highs and swing lows. So that's the euro. Not really much to talk about except to look at some potential levels that might be in play over the next several weeks. 1 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. So so that's basically what we're looking at there. I'm a little bit more bullish than bearish on the euro at this point in time. You've got another trend line coming into play here, on the daily chart. As long as we hold that trend line, then I think we're going to, we're going to probably keep grinding higher in the euro. Okay, let's switch markets here and take a look at some of the stock index futures. The theme that I've been looking at a lot over the last couple of weeks is sort of these cut patterns. So I've been noticing a lot of these sort of cut patterns in the market in a lot of different markets. You know, I've been seeing it in natural gas. I've been seeing it in the stock index futures. You see it a little bit in the euro. So you've got these kind of loose cup patterns here where you get, you know, this cup and then you get a pullback. There's the sort of the handle there on the weekly chart, and then you get a breakout above that level. So if we look at sort of this kind of pattern here, you can see you can see sort of, you know, from this high to this low in the Dow, we've come up and we've hit the 1272 extension. You can see that as well in the daily chart, you know, where you've got this kind of cup. I've been talking about this going back, you know, a few weeks, where you had in the last few videos where you have this cup, this handle, and you know, if you look at this from the perspective of Fib analysis, what you see here is, you know, from this high roughly to that low, it's not exactly the high. Let me just see if I can move it. On the daily chart, what you have is, you know, you came up, you tested that 1272 extension, but the interesting thing now is that you're right up and above these levels, these highs, and we pulled back down and we held support at the 21 EMA here on the daily chart. And then what you can see happening here is we've come all the way back up and, you know, retested those levels, and it looks like we want to push higher. So the question is going to be, is the 1618 extension, you know, a potential target in the works here? That would come in close to, you know, 14,000 in the Dow. So this is really the question that I'm looking at, and you know, only the price action next week will kind of tell us that. But if we close above these levels decisively next week, then I'm looking at a potential target. Personally, I'm looking at a potential target in and around here. And just a quick reminder, these videos are for educational purposes only, you know, in respect of looking at different aspects of technical analysis. They're not meant as trading or advice of any kind. So please read the disclaimers carefully at the end of this video. So that's kind of what I'm looking at here, you know, is these areas. So, you know, especially if we close this was the easy target from a Fib analysis perspective, and this is sort of the harder target here, the 1618. So these cup patterns, pay attention to them. You see them set up every once in a while, and I believe they're very, very powerful patterns because, you know, the price action has had a long time to base here and, you know, build up energy for, you know, for a move higher. That coupled with all the stimulus that we've been seeing, you know, especially in with the U.S. Federal Reserve, could be potentially playing a big factor in what's going on here. So that was the Dow futures. Let's take a look at the S&P and see if we're, you know, seeing a lot of the same things. So here's the S&P futures. You've got much the same thing going on here with these sort of, you know, you've got these kind of cup patterns, you know, and then you're breaking above them. So, you know, you can see it here on the daily chart as well. Let me just kind of move this chart around a bit so you can see it better. You know, you can see these kind of cup patterns here. There's a little bit of a handle and a push off and retesting the high. So it's very similar to the Dow. You know, the sisters are moving together, and they're still getting along. And then you look at the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ is much the same story on the weekly chart here, and the daily chart, you know, looks very similar. You've got this kind of cup pattern, and then you pull back. It's not as clean, and then you push higher, and you're not as close to the highs here as you were in the S&P and the Dow. So now if we take a look, you know, from a Dow perspective rather, at the transports, you know, the transports are pushing back up, but they're nowhere near, you know, their highs, and that's what kind of, you know, they're not breaking down, but they're just stuck closer to the bottom or the middle of this, you know, this price range here. And that sort of leads me to believe that all of this action in the stock indices is really, you know, as a result of stimulus. So that's all I have this week. Taking a look at the, you know, just the key currency, the Euro futures, taking a look at the stock indices. So I hope this helps, and have a fantastic Thanksgiving weekend. and we'll look forward to seeing you at one of the next meetups, or at the the upcoming CSTA meeting that we have coming up on Wednesday. We have a really good speaker lined up. Jeff Parent's going to be out talking about how he approaches the markets. Jeff is a portfolio manager, I believe, with Quadrex, and he has been he's a past president of the CSTA. He's been involved in in the markets and technical analysis for many years. So it will be very interesting to get Jeff's perspective on the markets, and we look forward to seeing you all there. Keep your eyes posted for an announcement that went out, and a reminder that will be going out in the next day or two. So happy Thanksgiving and good trading, and we'll see you at one of the next updates or at one of the upcoming meetings. Take care, everyone.